Evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the American Public University System Senior Seminar presentation on Aldo Leopold's A Sand County Almanac with essays on conservation from Round River. I will be your host this evening, and I am Frank McMahon, a senior at American Military University. So let's get into the topic at hand. This book here that you see on the slide is but one small part of Aldo Leopold's life. It was published just after his death in 1948 by Oxford University Press. He had been working on this for about 12 years prior to his death as a way to connect average people with the intrinsic value of the wild. His family changed the name, the original title of the book, to reflect where Aldo's heart was most often, and that was where he lived with his family in Sand County, Wisconsin, hence the name of the book here. The shack, which was their home in Sand County, was a beat-up, disparaged old farm in which Aldo and his family purchased and replanted trees on it amongst its acres to seemingly trying to reverse time to what its initial splendor once was. Each year, thousands of people to this very day still flock to his farm in Wisconsin to catch a glimpse of Aldo's world. So I was always told not to judge a book by its cover, but in this instance I will. First, the picture adorning this book is a choice, but one small aspect of creation that Aldo appreciated, the regal goose. A quick excerpt from his book goes like this. This is Aldo talking. Once the first geese are in, they honk a clamorous invitation to each migrating flock, and in a few days the marsh is full of them. On our farm, we measure the amplitude of our spring by 2 yardsticks, the number of pines planted, and the numbers of geese that stop. Our record is 642 geese counted in on 11 April 1946. Secondly, any book that touts on its cover that it's at home on the same shelf as John Muir is worthy in my mind. And before we get into the book a little bit further, let's look at the author. So to understand the Sand County Almanac, one must understand who Aldo was. This is a picture of Aldo, and by no means did Aldo grow up with the saddle horn in hand like this Western photo depicts. He was born in Burlington, Iowa in 1887. His interest in the natural world started at a young age. He graduated from Yale Forest School in 1909 and took his first post in the newly established Forest Service in Arizona and New Mexico. By age 24, he was promoted to a post supervisor at the Carson National Forest in New Mexico. And this picture here on the slide is approximately around that time. And Aldo said it best himself when he recounts his book that as a young forester he sets out to change the West, but in the end the West changed him immensely. So many of his stories contained in the Sand County Almanac are alive with tales from his time in the western U.S. During this time he also courted and married his love Estella. Right there, along with Aldo and their dog. So Estella, she came from a rich Spanish family whose father and grandfather had one of the largest sheep operations in the West. In an interesting twist, Aldo was at odds with much of the sheep grazing, as it had detrimental effects on the land that he was sought to protect, or he was entrusted to protect. So part of Aldo's story wouldn't be complete without knowing his strong love for his wife and his children. Also interesting is that Estella, during her time with Aldo, at their second assignment in Wisconsin, which is where the shack is, she was the top female archer in the Midwest at the time. So additionally, 3 of their 5 children were elected to the prestigious National Academy of Science. I think they might be doing all right as parents. So Aldo was known to each day ask everyone in his family what was the most interesting thing that they had learned that day. And the Sand County shack was the formidable years of their kids' development. And they all loved and cherished that place dearly. And Aldo had a real relationship with his wife and kids, a far cry from some of the things we do today, like the small chats between school, piano, and soccer practice. I think we could all learn a lesson from Aldo in that the manner and truth that we're never told to ask why. So his affinity with asking why likely led him down the path of becoming the father of game management in the U.S., and was pivotal in conjuring up and synthesizing his thoughts contained in the Sand County Almanac. So this picture here is of Aldo on his Sand County property with his trusty binoculars and notebook in hand. Oftentimes, Aldo would wake up around 3:30 a.m. with his binos and his notebook and a coffee pot, and he'd head out to appreciate that natural beauty, that early morning symphony amongst the animals that called his property home. So one of the beauties of his Sand County work was his ability to provide the reader with a sense of value, from something as small as a field mouse to something as great and grand as the green fire within a dying wolf's eye. So before Aldo's death in 1948, he was set to be one of America's first representatives at a United Nations sponsored conference on conservation the year following his death. So, but instead he died of a heart attack while helping his neighbor next door to the shack extinguish a wildfire. So author William Jordan said about Leopold that he has become one of the defining legends of environmentalism. So what's even more interesting is that Aldo's writing from 1947 ring true to this very day. His work has stood the test of time, some 70 years now, and much of what he understood then is even more applicable and dire today. Many have considered Aldo to be the father of wildlife ecology and of the wilderness system in the United States. He has assuredly left his mark. So it's been said before that when an idea whose time has come, it cannot be stopped or destroyed. And that's kind of why I titled this slide the way that I did. Aldo's work will forevermore be immortalized in the sense of awakening an environmental consciousness of millions of people. He sold millions of copies of his book in multiple languages. So the first part of his book is a dialogue of him and a fellow laborer using a crosscut saw, one of those old two-handled saws, pulling and back and forth across this giant grand oak that they felled on the property. So, and as the saw broke away the years of historic growth rings, Aldo went back through time, memorializing the days of a bygone past, the times that the carrier pigeon sat aloof on top of this giant oak, the droughts, the depressions that this tree has endured, and he recognized the anthropogenic damage, the draining of pristine watersheds for row crops, and witnessed and was a part of a first-hand extirpation of the wolf out west. His recognizable wit and ability to pin humanity's tie to the natural world around them is remarkable. So Aldo's clarity of thought with regard to preserving tomorrow's future is like an undoing of the opening scene of his book with the crosscut saw. We have the knowledge of how to undo the deep scars within the environmental realm, and Aldo has forevermore given an even deeper insight to the world around us. His legacy carries on, not on the back of the horse pictured here, but on the backs of humanity. His idea and his insight cannot be destroyed. So here are the references cited in this presentation. There's 3 of them. And then, ladies and gentlemen, it's been my pleasure this evening to share a short bit about Aldo Leopold's life and his work in the Sand County Almanac. Thank you for attending this presentation, and I'm hopeful that you'll enjoy all of the other seminars within the American Public University System Senior Seminar presentations. Have a great night.